Good afternoon and welcome to the Board of Selectmen's meeting for Friday, October 19th. Proposed agenda is that we'll be meeting about the special town meeting on October 28th, 2019 to discuss any article in the warrant, but mainly and specifically to discuss Articles 9, 10, 11 regarding the smart sewer project and any other correspondence that we might have. Mr. Clerk, would you lead us in the Pledge of Allegiance?
Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America,
And to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mr. Town Administrator, would you like to start us off in this?
I'd be glad to. So, as you had stated earlier, the focus of today's meeting is to discuss Articles 9, 10, and 11 on the town meeting, for the special town meeting. And certainly the board can discuss any other matter. I don't have any specific requests for other articles tonight, but if the conversation leads into any, we have that flexibility. Town council is here to discuss Article 9, and then I think that would be just a board discussion for Articles 10 and 11. We could start with Article 9, or we could start with Articles 10 and 11.
Start with 9.
Take
Take it away.
Good afternoon, everybody. Nice to be here. So, Article 9, in your packet, you have the an act establishing the Littleton Common Sewer District in the town of Littleton. So, recall that we passed this at the spring town meeting, and we'd like to make some changes to it, or the purpose of the article is to make some amendments to the act to be passed by the legislature. And so there's kind of 5 specific changes that I wanted to make sure I brought to you for your consideration. The first is we substitute water commissioners for Board of Selectmen. So throughout the act, wherever it did say Board of Selectmen, it now says water commissioners, so that the act is now being drafted on behalf of the water commissioners as the sewer, to function as sewer commissioners as opposed to the selectmen. I think pretty straightforward. And so, and I know none of you are shy, but just stop me at any point instead of waiting. The second change, which I think was being considered, was in the original act, it required that if the sewer district were to be expanded, it would require vote of back in May, the selectmen and town meeting. So obviously we're switching that to now it's a vote of the water commissioners, and the question is, shall we leave in town meeting to vote on any expansion of the district, or shall we put it in the hands of the water commissioners? The way I have drafted it is I left town meeting in there, so that's true to form of what we saw in the spring. The third, it's as much of a note as it is a change, but we reference an attached plan, and so this is just to confirm that the plan we were circulating in the spring is still the same plan. It's the same parcels. And we also called for a list. The list is not yet attached, and we should either add a list or delete the words that there is a list. But I think so the list is kind of just a secondary, and I'm assuming
It's just the enumeration of the map, right?
Yeah.
Right.
I'm assuming the map hasn't changed, and if it has, we'll need to change that. Okay, the fourth change you'll see in section 2, where originally we were referencing section 4 of chapter 40N of the general laws, and that's originally where the selectmen were drawing their authority. I've changed that to chapter 83. And so I guess here's the way to look at it. I think we meant chapter 83 last year, but used chapter 40N, section 4. Chapter 40N is more like setting up an authority so that the sewer commission would function a little bit outside of town meeting the way the light department does. If you want to keep it that way, that's certainly a way to do it. By substituting chapter 83, it makes it more like, so the water department is a board of the town. It would make the sewer commission a board of the town as well. It keeps it in line with the town, and would make it, so borrowing money would come through town meeting is the kind of main point there. And the fifth change is that it would allow, and this is right in section 1, you see the blue kind of right at the bottom where it says the treatment and disposal facilities and associated infrastructure may be located either inside or outside of the district. So this makes it clear that if we find a parcel outside of the district where we want to put the treatment plant, it can be so. Other than that, the act really remains the same. So so these are kind of tweaks based on switching it to water commissioners as opposed to wholesale changes. But happy to discuss any and all of those if anyone has any questions.
Questions for the board?
Just to confirm, while you offered the choice with the language you put in, maintain the town meeting vote for expansion of the district, correct?
Yes,
Great.
that's the blue kind of midway through.
Yep.
Yeah.
Anything else?
So if the board's comfortable with this version, I'll present this version in the supplemental report when we discuss it on the 24th.
And from a technical perspective, I think it would be better if the motion language, because this will be in the motion, if the motion language were clean, and then maybe had a red line available as an exhibit or, as a handout or something like that. But I never like underlines and cross-outs in the motion language, and especially when we're gonna be conveying it to the legislature, yeah.
Okay.
But I do really I think it's fundamentally important that if we're telling town meeting, hey, we're tweaking this, we also have a red line
What the
version.
changes are.
Yeah.
So it's clear we're not trying to play
Right.
hide the ball. It's-
Right, and if it, and so ultimately, it's a political question, and if the board feels more comfortable putting the red line, underline in the motion, we can certainly make that work. It's just, this is just, from a legal perspective, it looks cleaner.
No, I
with
think
that.
that's easier. If we have, you're basically saying you repeat the sections. You have the actual motion, and then right below that, you have the red line version, which will
Yeah.
document exactly what was changed. And
Yeah.
those two, once you delete the items to be struck out, should be identical.
Yeah,
Okay. I'll make sure to do that, if the
Okay.
board's comfortable with that.
Yeah, that sounds good.
Tom, can you go back and explain again, because I'm sure someone is gonna ask this, and ultimately I'm gonna defer to you at town meeting floor, but the distinction between chapter 40 and chapter 83 again, because I'm not
Sure.
sure I follow that.
so
completely.
in kind of in broad strokes, it conveys the same authority. It gives you the authority to operate a sewer board, department, and do all the things we need to. And remember, this act is a conglomeration of a number of different powers drawn from various parts of the state law.
Yeah, I remember the drafting was not
Yeah,
simple.
yeah. But chapter 40N functions a little more like an authority. And so my example of an authority in Littleton is the light department, right? So the light department is really its own entity that's associated with the town, but is not so much, functions outside of town meeting.
So the light department can borrow money based purely on the whims of the light commissioners.
I'm not saying that the light department can do that. I'd have to actually look at their
Okay.
specific powers. But under
So
80,
don't use that example.
right, but under 40N, you could borrow money
Okay.
outside of town meeting. And so this just kind of on having an opportunity to look at it again and go through it again and talking about the changes with Paul, I thought, you know what, I think chapter 83 fits a little better with what we're trying to do.
And so as far as town meeting is concerned, if I were to say that change ensures that town meeting has greater oversight
Yes.
of the sewer, that would be an accurate statement?
Yes.
Okay.
Water department aware of that proposed part of it?
I mean, other than having seen it, I don't know. I
Okay,
never
so-
had that specific conversation with them.
But they've got the document in any event,
Yeah,
right?
thank you.
I haven't heard them, I don't think they were concerned one way or the other. They weren't
Yeah.
citing chapters. I think they were just anticipating that it would work the same as the water department worked.
Yeah, and again, so that the 83 part is how they set up their department, but there's a lot of statutory authority in here, and it still allows us to, you know, construct, operate, and maintain the sewer system as we've always envisioned.
Thank you for clarifying.
Anything else?
The only other, so you added back in the need for town meeting approval
Yeah.
as well as the commissioners. And that's just to make sure that the will of the people is heard, I assume. That's your advice, that we add that in?
Yeah, I think it's a political question whether or not you want to have town meeting, but I think it's, from sitting in, you know, sitting through the presentation in the spring, I think that's what was conveyed to the town, so it seemed more consistent.
I think keeping that language is also consistent with the use of my understanding of chapter 83 as well. My newfound understanding.
I think another important reason for making it a little bit more difficult to expand the map is it affects the whole financing model for people who hook up for betterments and all the rest of it. I mean, the model that's proposed for the people in the current district is based on the totality of that district. You start adding pieces on the edges, it skews everything. So it really is gonna be done methodically in chunks in order for it to work.
I would add in economically viable
Right.
chunks.
And fairness too, yeah,
And maybe politically viable chunks.
right?
Any questions from the audience and the question? Mr. Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I sent you a feedback on that article. I feel that the changes that I'm hearing here that the council made on that is substitute the Board of Selectmen and put the Water Commission in there. The Water Commission is, and Lights is enterprise. And I find no need for the selectmen to turn over this to the water department and have the water department being confronted with the questions and everything that's going on with this particular operation and control of that. There's no plan, so we haven't seen anything with regards to the 2.2 that's been already approved with full plans on this. I don't really have an object to the fact that the water enterprise could do it, because to set up an enterprise, they're already enterprise, so they're hitting two elements, entities of the town right now, and that the sewer will be the third. And in a case like that, they probably would have to add on a little bit help there, but they can do the billing and everything that needs to be done. And they would need a manager for the sewer department there. But I think the selectmen at this point is passing the buck with regards to this project. This is a project that the town is going to own, and for you to give it over to the water department gets it off your back if they have question and concern, go and see the water department. I don't think that's fair to the people. I'm gonna have 4 minutes at the town meeting. I'm gonna use my 4 minutes to encourage the people to vote this down. Because I don't think it's right for the selectmen to pass the buck at this point in time. You can turn control, and I talked to the chair of the water commission, and they talked about this before, and they asked me, I said, where's the public hearings and stuff that's been on there? He said, we didn't do it. The board said that, listen, if we don't have full control of this project before the shovel go in the ground, we're not gonna take it. So I said, well, you know, they don't have to change this now and say that the water commissioners are going to do it. You can put it in because they said they want to amend the special act here. You could still state in there that this third enterprise is going to be under the current enterprise of Light, Electric, and Water Department Board of Commissions, as I stated in the feedback that I said in there. That can be done at any time, but that doesn't mean that you need to turn over the project at this early date to the water commissioners. You haven't told the people here with regards to what's going on here with this control. Where are the control? Where are the plans? What's going on? None of that. If we got complaints, you're the head of the town. And the people have the right to come to the head element of the town. You pass it over to the enterprise. The enterprise is a separate entity that operates on itself and by itself. Only coming to the town for certain things. Other than that, all monies they're collected, it is the enterprise. They can either put it in capital improvement or reduce the rate. Those are the only two categories that they can do. I find that this time, for this to be done, especially this meeting to be held at 3 o'clock on a Friday, is not due diligence to the people of the town of Littleton. I think the people of the town of Littleton should know what's going on. You explain it more into what's been sent out now. They're going to get a modification on the 28th. But this is information, to me, you should hold it. You should not put it before the people until you get your act together and there's been public hearings on what we'd like to do. Maybe the people said, no, we don't want to do that. Maybe they say, yeah, we want to do that. But I'm going to use my 4 minutes to encourage them to vote it down. Thank you.
Thank you.
No, I would just say that in response to the point that the board is meeting at 3 p.m. today, I take responsibility for that. The board knows that we were originally scheduled to meet at 8:30 a.m., but unfortunately I didn't post the meeting at 8:30, so the 2 days prior. Just wanted to address that, please.
I'll tackle some of it. Mr. Sanders, I obviously got your letter and appreciate it, but I'll tell you, thinking back to the town meeting in the fall, the spring, one of the legitimate questions is, who's going to run it? Because the selectmen sure don't know how to run it, and we had not settled that issue, but it had been openly talked about that the light and water departments were a logical and obvious choice because of they're already in the utility business and they have a great reputation for that, and the public is very comfortable using them to address them on issues with, water bills, water delivery issues, same with the electric side of the house. And we very openly had meetings with them throughout the summer, and then I think it was about 6 weeks ago, we signed a memorandum of understanding with them here at a public televised meeting. So that's kind of old news. We were adjusting the legislation that was passed in the spring to reflect that fact, but that's I think that's a great step forward. I'm glad they're willing to take it on, and it's appropriate for them to take it on at the beginning of the construction phase, or the design phase for that matter. So that's, I appreciate your opinion, but I couldn't disagree more. I think it's we're getting it away from us who we generalize to a board that specifically is in that kind of business.
Yeah, Jane Crisfield, Mill Lane. I thought his comments were pretty instructive, but one thing that really hits home is that during this year, there have been no real meetings, public meetings just dedicated to the sewer and all the changes being made by these 3 articles here. So when we went around again on this sewer for, 7 years ago, and it never came to town meeting because I think there was not support among the Littleton community for a sewer in the common. At least there were meetings that were educating the public. There was a group of people that were engaged from this side, and I find that right now I'm kind of at a loss to understand what is going on here because we haven't been informed as public citizens what is going on. This is a huge project. And when you look at the next article where it goes from 2 million to what, 25 million or 22 million, something like that, I think you're going to have a tough time getting this passed at town meeting. And I'd like to thank George for bringing up the information he brought up. I got educated by what he brought up. I hadn't thought of that before. Just my comments.
I'm going to just say that for the past 4 town meetings, we've had articles before the town dealing with the sewer in different phases, and every one of them have passed. So the only, I mean, that's been special, fall special and annual town meetings. And in the spring, we made it very clear we were coming back in the fall. And the level of changes really just speak to the ones transferring the power of the management of the project to the water commissioners, as well as identifying a location for the plant as the second one. And the third one is basically scaling back the scope of the overall project. So it's pretty simple and straightforward, and they've all been discussed at public meetings. So, I mean, it isn't that we're in a position to discuss all these details as new, because they're essentially as the same as they were in the great majority as they were presented in at the Maytown meeting. So I don't know that there's a reason to revisit all of that, although we certainly can. But as far as the specific changes to what was proposed in the spring, they're on the table. And other than that, we're just going forward the way we said we were going to go forward.
Mr. Kennedy?
James Kennedy, 50 Gilson Road. There had been discussion about bringing in the Littleton Light and Water Department for the past 6 months. And I think it's a great, you guys put this into the act, and it's going to save the town so much money. You won't have to create a new bureaucracy. You won't have to hire, as many people. You won't have to set up office space for the sewer district. All those savings, and you have the talent already right there in the Littleton Light and Water Department. It's good to leverage that talent. So I think it's great that you're doing it now, and early on is better. Thank you.
Just a quick comment, just relative to passing the buck. I appreciate your comments, Mr. Sanders, but relative to us passing the buck and not taking responsibility for sewering the town, the common, it took the courage of some of our predecessors to establish a municipal utility, and the residents have benefited from that. We've got a model utility in our LELWD, and they're very well respected. We've got a training facility that has been built on our campus, and people look to Littleton for guidance and as mentors for other departments. There's many municipalities around us that are jealous of what we've got. It is an asset, to echo what Mr. Kennedy has said, and I think we are collectively doing what is right for the town by not having 5 volunteers that are elected or not elected every 3 years be the people that are in charge of such an important asset of the town, and putting professionals in place that get what it is that we're trying to do.
Moving on to Article 10. Oh, Mr. Sims?
Mr. Chairman, I just want to make a brief comment. If you read what I written, I didn't say that the water department was not the place to control it. I said it was. I said that I thought it was too early at this point in time for the selectmen to give that over to them and have the people now deal with the water department over there. And yes, I used the word
That's the one.
passing the buck. I've been at this game a long time, and I understand politics. And I know about enterprise. I feel that you haven't did enough to tell the people about what you want to do and how you want to run it, coming from the head of the town of Littleton. Thank you.
Next article.
Borrowing article?
10.
Yep. Well, Mr. Chairman, I don't know if there's anything you want to say prefatory to it. I just thought it was important to circulate and apologize. Chris Stoddard created the document last week before the joint meeting, which I was not able to attend most of, but what he did was go back and review the, basically the cost analysis that had been looked at a year ago with the Finance Department, the Finance Committee, and our engineers and team, and revised it as he felt was appropriate with market conditions. Essentially, certain items reflected a 5% increased cost. Also plugged in money for land acquisition, which we weren't, as you recall, initially intending to be a needed cost because we were going to build on town land. But thirdly, and in the other direction, is to deduct out the costs associated with the quirk aspect for two reasons. One is it's modular, so it can stand alone, and having it as part of the budgeted project, I think, it came for under some fair criticism that you're making all the other, everybody in the district carry the financial burden of funding that when it hadn't proved itself. So the water commissioners would, they don't want to dismiss that idea out of hand, but they would prefer to have that stand on its own 2 feet, and if a economically and environmentally feasible program can be brought forward, then they're willing to adopt it, but there's no reason to include it here, so subsequent.
Let's walk before we run.
Yeah, walk before we run, and the nice part in the short term is it reduces the cost and the associated betterments and fees from what was projected to be about $32 million, I think the last time we looked at it, down to 25.5. And
So, just for, Paul, can I jump in there?
Sure.
Paul and I have kicked this around. I think Paul and I have differences of opinion on this, and this is really partly where the board needs to come in. So, some additional information on timing of this. Followed up with Nick Lawler, who followed up with folks at the state with respect to the MassWorks money. One of my principal concerns is ensuring that we utilize that MassWorks money effectively. And what we understand from Nick is that as long as we utilize that money by the end of the fiscal year, that is next summer, June 30th, we're good. I've got some concerns about bringing this forward right now. My opposing viewpoint to bringing it forward is to wait and not advance a motion to bring Article 10 forward at this meeting, but rather bring it forward in the spring. And what we would do in the spring is bring it forward with bids for a portion of the project, essentially the portion that we would break ground on immediately, with cost estimates to support the rest of it. We would, if I was doing this exactly the way I wanted to do it at this point, we would come forward in the spring and be prepared to pass it on Monday and break ground on Tuesday, essentially, not unlike how the fire station was done. So that we could put forward to the residents, here's what, I don't know, let's say the first $5 million phase, I'm picking a number. What the first $5 million is a bid number, and it's not just a reasonable cost estimate, which is what these are, but rather something that we're ready to go forward with today. That would have two advantages. One is the actual bid number, which is, we have good cost estimates, but a bid is always going to be more reliable than a cost estimate. And number two, it still allows us to utilize that MassWorks money. In fact, we don't even have to use all of the $1.5 million of the MassWorks money. We've got to use $750,000, $650,000, several $100,000 anyway, in that ballpark, before the end of the year. And if we are prepared to break ground immediately following town meeting, which is a very reasonable thing for us to do, I don't see any issue delaying the discussion of this. The counterpoint being, we've got a certain amount of momentum associated with the land acquisition piece and the transfer to the sewer commissioners. So I think it's a discussion that we need to have collectively as a board. I'm very receptive to, as much as I think that the general scope hasn't changed, I'm very receptive to the idea that some residents don't feel like they've been adequately informed about this phase of the project. I would argue it hasn't changed that much, but do see their point that more discussion, more public outreach could be helpful here. And so pushing it off also allows us to do that. So my argument would be that we don't advance a motion on Article 10. We continue with our design process, and we bring forward a more precise number come spring.
Do we run into any problems by passing, if it passes 9 and 11 and not passing 10?
Well, we don't have any money. Can't do anything, and the rest of it's all window dressing. The money is what matters.
9, no, 10, 11, you mean the property acquisition component? I think
11 does allow you to appropriate a sum of money, theoretically. So theoretically, if 11 passed and 10 did not, you should be able to implement the purchase through 11, because it does say to appropriate a sum of money. Just that detail, just for your knowledge.
Yeah, that money is already anticipated in Article 10 as part of the borrowing.
Right, you may not, well, I don't know that detail, but you may not wish to obviously, I mean, there may be no benefit to Article 11 if you don't have Article 10, maybe also the other wrinkle.
I think we've had and deferred for those very same argument, reasons of argument last fall, last spring, and now it's here again. And we're effectively ready to go, and we should have been in the ground years ago. I mean, we missed federal monies by delaying before. We've got $6 million in state earmarks. I can't imagine delaying is making us better candidates to access that money. And until we actually vote to authorize the borrowing, it's mostly just talking about a sewer, not making a sewer.
The one thing I'll say to that point, though, is the town is much more inclined to act on those funding sources when we have some percentage of design completion. So, to Chase's point, if we put the time and the effort and the energy into getting to a point where we are shovel-ready, when we go to town meeting in May, we vote on Monday, approve it, we're ready to go to the state and say, we have all of this ready to go. We don't have that right now. We've got a plan, but it's not as detailed and as well spelled out as we could be. We probably should be.
I think probably should be is fair, and if anyone owns individual responsibility for that, I think that's us, right? And we could have and should have pushed that forward harder
I was gonna say,
simultaneously.
if that was so important a part, boy, I wish that information had come out 3-4 months ago, and we could have made that happen as well. I think what we were operating under at that time is we were collectively happy that we were out of a contract with engineers that we had a, less than wonderful relationship with. The Light and Water Commissioners are in a position to go to the market and pick different engineers if they want, or renegotiate with those engineers. But with the conscious decision not to re-engage with them, we were not in a position to develop more detailed plans. But if that were a concern, that could have been raised, and perhaps should have been raised May, June, July. So I'm surprised to be, I don't dispute the validity of the argument, except that it hadn't been raised before now.
You're not wrong. I think in terms of what we have been able to accomplish, it's been very important to get the MOU with the sewer done, with the water commissioners done. It's been very important to move the ball forward in a meaningful way on the alternative locations. I don't particularly want to apologize to the town for having done those things at the expense of the others, but frankly, that's part of the story.
Yeah.
So, I mean, I agree with the comments that have been conveyed here today. Chase hit on some important points, as did Chuck. Certainly listening to the concerns raised by the public attendees here today regarding this project. I just like to look at the articles, weigh them in their own merit. I think originally, the first step, transferring the supervision and control to the Light and Water Commissioners makes sense. As Paul said, based on the feedback that we received at town meeting in the past, who's going to control the system, who's going to operate the system. And as to Chuck's point, we do have an amazing Light and Water Department. We're very fortunate. They're certainly capable, and it does make sense to relinquish our control of the project to the people that are more capable. We certainly, I appreciate it when people know their limitations, but are not afraid to say, hey, I know you're better equipped to handle this for us, or for me, or whatever situation you're in. It takes a lot of guts to stand up and say, it's not my wheelhouse. As board members, we do that all the time, and I think we do it very well. We each have our own wheelhouse. And certainly, the Light and Water Commissioners, the sewer project is more of their wheelhouse for the next step, for the next phases in this project compared to us. So I appreciate Mr. Sanders' comments on his feelings on Article 9. I hope that maybe with further discussions, he might reconsider some of his positions, because I think that transfer is an important step at this stage in this project. With regard to Article 10, I do agree with the comments that Chase made. I just don't see that we're there yet. And I agree, I don't believe that we've engaged the public enough for a project this size and magnitude. And I know in the past, there was public forums, there was a lot more information regularly coming to the board at meetings, and there's just been a lull. And for whatever the reason is, the fact remains, there's been a lull. And I just personally just don't feel that we're there yet. I don't think that residents are comfortable with the project or information that's been brought before them. I mean, this is a significant project for the town of Littleton. And to say that if we don't bring Article 10 forward at this town meeting, I think we'll be much better equipped to bring it forward in May. Especially if we can pass Article 9 and get the water commissioners on board. I just think it's too important to bring it forward now with so many questions unanswered. I just think it would be, I don't want to say the word irresponsible, but it's just, timing is everything, and I just don't feel that the timing is right. I think we can do so much better if we take the time between now and the spring to really bring this project forward to the public.
I would note with our ability, with Article 9 on the warrant, I would hope that if we ultimately didn't advance a motion for Article 10, but only for Article 9, my expectation would be we would use part of the discussion of Article 9 to lay out the trajectory for the rest of this, right?
Right.
The Article 9 is really, it's not just about the transfer of control, but ultimately the trajectory of the whole project.
Right.
And so I think we can simultaneously convey that trajectory with respect to the water department and with respect to the project as a whole, including timing and costs, as we understand.
I personally believe that we thought we had 9, 10, 11 all set to go. We've gone through the process. I guess I'm a little taken back that at this time that we aren't all on the same page and all set to go. I don't know why we'd even be there. Why did we go through that process that come to this point? It's our article. Just to pull it. That's,
I mean, if there was a lull, and I'll accept your characterization, Cindy, it's because we had two basic projects, and one was at our initiative to open the dialogue with the water commissioners, and we've successfully resolved that. And since they're intending to run it, they took the lead on, although we did it as a group, the group continued to work on it, identified the alternative sites, and we were fortunate to have what looks to be a great success story there. But those were coming out of last spring's town meeting were the two big issues that needed to be resolved.
Right.
So I'm not sure, and although now we hear, well, it'd be great to have a greater level of specificity in the design stage. Well, again, too late to change that now, but that wasn't, I didn't anticipate that as part of the marching orders when we got out of town meeting in the spring. Although, I've heard arguments for, boy, we'll be ready next time, or this timing isn't right, and, it's been going on for interminably.
There's a major
good argument in the
differentiator
spring,
between,
too.
there's a major differentiator between then, the past and now, and there's two major differentiators. One is the shot clock on a big chunk of state money. And number two is that the town has granted a significant appropriation. So it's one thing to say, oh, the timing isn't right, when there's no money to do any work anyway, but there's $2.2 million sitting there, not 2.2 anymore. Some of it's been spent, but there's 2.2 million sitting there to be spent on moving forward with the design. So it's not just that the timing isn't right, we're not going to do anything for 6 months until the timing is right, but rather, let's move further down the design path so that in 6 months, it's not a timing issue, it's a completeness issue.
Tell you, if I was sitting in the boardroom at Northern Bank where they're ready to file plans, I'm sure I would be looking at this saying, this town's not really serious about a sewer, because they keep talking about it, and there's too many things that are waiting to happen for this to happen, and I think it's a terrible signal we send to say, we'll keep voting on things that don't actually make it happen, but
See, I don't think this appropriation moves the ball forward in terms of a date of completion in any huge way, right? If we start right now, this article passes, Article 10 passes, we've got all this money. Over the next 6 months, a huge chunk of that design work has got to happen anyway. So ultimately, in my mind, does passing Article 10 now versus 6 months from now, it certainly doesn't change the completion date
Well,
6 months. Maybe it changes the completion date.
You've clearly got the votes here, so I'm not going to argue on what you're attempting to do here, except that the second half of what you said sounded even more horrifying than the first half of delaying it to the spring, to come at it in chunks. God forbid, what are we gonna do, build a third of a system and then another third, we wouldn't build a school that way. At least commit that when we're gonna ask for the money to build the thing, we're gonna ask for the money to build the thing, and not pieces of it.
At the end of the day, you just made the point. I mean, the votes sit where the votes sit, I think, right now, and I think we all know where that is. But I think that if we're being honest, if we move forward with Article 10, we've got one bite at the apple, really, right?
I don't agree with that, but that's fine.
And I feel as though residents are not ready to take that bite right now. And I think that it's incumbent upon us to do that calculus and determine whether or not it's gonna pass. And we need to get this passed. You stated Northern Bank, that's a big swath of our common area. There's a number of properties that we hope will take advantage of us suing the common. And specifically to Mon and his project, they're looking at 2024 or something like that that's what their target date is, I believe. But that's neither here nor there. I think that right now, I was pretty vocal about, I didn't feel as though, without having all the numbers, I wasn't comfortable making a vote in support of the library. I'm frustrated that we're not gonna have a number, even as late as next Thursday, when we have our last meeting before town meeting, we're not gonna know what that number is. Yet, we're moving that project forward, and that sickens me to some degree. And I'd be a bit of a hypocrite if I said, we had a number of $2.5 to $25 million a week or so ago. And if we're live by the sword, die by the sword, I guess, but I think that if we want to give the sewer the highest and best opportunity to get done in Littleton, my belief is that we put all the pieces in place, get Article 9 passed. I'm okay with allocating $1 million, up to $1 million for purchasing land or something like that. But I just don't think that, frankly, I don't think it'll pass if we move forward right now.
Well, I very much appreciate both your sincerity, the consistency of your arguments. I reach a different conclusion with you, but that's respectfully.
Likewise.
I know Mr. Zeldin with the.
Yeah, Michael Zeldin, 11 Lawrence Street. I'm also the chairman of the Master Plan Implementation Committee. And I have some, we voted unanimously for this particular warrant item, and it was discussed many times by our group. And we had several expert, shall we say, people come in and describe to us in some detail to supplement what had been going on for, shall we say, I'll give the date of birth erroneously as 2017. It goes back further than that. The other thing is our biggest enemy, excuse me, and may I have this just for a second? The biggest enemy to your discussion is this piece of paper. Because by law, and I do understand it, each and every item, every warrant item has to have a separate little category in reading and cold prose. And you have to decide each one individually. However, you're dealing here with a town. This is a legal document. What we're talking about here is a project. We're talking about a project that's part of something else. The sewer does not stand alone. It's a means to an end for other things. And one of the things that the sewer does is it does more than revitalizes the common, it revitalizes it, it awakens the town. And the town needs awakening, because the process of doing business as usual is to do incremental pieces. That's fine when you're not, as it were, trying to catch up, and all we're doing at the moment is falling behind. We're not in control of our destiny. We struggle with development, trying to make decisions, trying to understand and cope with the changes that are going around us, some of which we have no control. Here's an opportunity for us to treat this project as a project, not incrementally. Any business, any property owner in the common they don't think of this as incremental. This is an enterprise, totally an enterprise, Mr. Sanders. It pays for itself. It's a totally different project than building the library, which has its own investment value in what it does for the people. The sewer system is just a piece of the revitalization of the town, not just the common. By breaking this up into pieces, as has been suggested, or suggesting the town isn't ready for it, that has to do with the leadership here and elsewhere, not just when the Board of Selectmen, has to do with the Planning Board, and every other committee and group who takes responsibility for specific areas. That leadership still is not yet used to the idea that things are connected, that we don't live in silos. This is not just about the common. It's about Taylor Street. It's how we think about Taylor Street. It's how we think about housing, how we implement our housing policies. Where does it go? How much does it cost? When you increment something like, very frankly, it's $25 to $32 million for a sewer system in the 21st century. I'm sorry, ladies and gentlemen, that's peanuts. You're very, very lucky to have that opportunity. And to do this piecemeal sends a clear signal to the very imaginative entrepreneurs and people who want to occupy a very small piece of the total town, who want to make better use of their land, who want to, whether they want to or not, fill our coffers with some bucks. You signal them very clearly you're not ready, you don't want to, you're afraid to. Whatever the signal you're giving, you're basically making the town run that much slower. I'm asking for your leadership here. I'm asking you to step out in front of the town, the skeptics. I don't think there's 2/3 skeptics. I think what we've got are 2/3 people who are ready to go when you express the leadership to do it. If you continue to stay a slave to each of these particular items and view that through that particular kind of microscope, we will increment ourselves to mediocrity. We will continue to watch our residents leave after they finish high school. We'll continue to watch people simply collect modicum rents in the common and allow the paint to peel, the fences to go in the discard. No one will, shall we say, respond to an increment that changes how we are. And that's what this sewer does. It matters a great deal beyond the common. You can't increment it. One of the major reasons I'm very pleased the water department has decided to take over that, because we're now not in the area of politics, we're in the area of implementation. This is a professional job. This is not a political job, it's a professional job. And you've wisely decided to, shall we say, provide that assignment to the water department. Let the water department do its work. This is a project, not an incremental game of allocation of funds, especially one that pays for itself. So please follow, shall we say, the recommendation, the guidance, the promotion of the Master Plan Implementation Committee, and stand up and lead. Thank you.
Mr. Sanders?
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, I want to say that first and foremost, water is a commodity that is very precious to all of us. The Clean Water Act was passed by Congress, and the EPA is the one that will see that the Clean Water Act is implemented. I seen when, and was around, when EPA told Lunenburg and Leominster, you need to put in a sewer treatment system, or you need to get onto a system. Fitchburg had the system, but none of them did. And finally, Lunenburg, I talked and have Joe Bellotti at that time, he was the chairman of the Selectmen of Lunenburg, to get on the system with Fitchburg. And the deal was a 5-year plan. And they were going to do the Whalen District. At that time, Leominster started upgrading their system. So when it was done, Lunenburg pulled into Leominster. My thing is this here. It is the nitrogen that we are concerned about for our groundwater. And we should be more concerned here in Littleton because we have wells. At some point in time, you're going to have to put a system in. I think that Chase makes a good point. And the reason I say he makes a good point is because, one, there's a lot of pieces, there's a lot of data that the people don't know about. We are hoping that the sewer system is going to pay for itself. But one thing I know for sure is that the town is going to have the bill. If it's 25 million, 27 million, whatever it is, the town holds the ultimate responsibility to pay that bill. So we don't even know what the betterment fees are at this point in time.
Yeah, we do.
Well, let me just say, I'm talking about this article. It's not in that article that tells the people what it is.
No, and you'll never see it in that article, that's not where it belongs, but the betterments would
If you look-
be 27,500 per EDU and a single home user charge of $1,414 a year. An EDU is 330 gallons a day. I don't remember the exact numbers, but that's less than it was when we looked at it 6 months ago or a year ago. But anyway, carry on, just didn't want to get too many falsehoods out there.
Well, I'm not telling you nothing false.
Yeah.
Because if it's not there, it's not there. If the people don't know it, they don't know it. Asking for open line of credit, 2.2 we already approved, and now you're talking about up to 25 or $26 million. People concerned.
Down to 25 from 32, but what's,
I respect you, Mr. Galvin. Please don't interrupt me again. I'm trying to explain my position as a taxpayer and as a citizen in this town of Littleton. I will do what I have to do and say what I have to say, and ain't nobody gonna stop me from saying what I have to say. I'm an easy person to get along with. But make no mistake, don't try to undermine me. I feel on this article that it is to the benefit of this town to hold this article and get more data so that the people can understand, and the most important thing, what is their tax rate going to be? The question, I've heard two answers. Is this project going to be within levy, or is it going to be outside of the levy? We have a $29 million red debt right now. Can we afford to pay and add $25 million inside the levy? That's a question.
Oh, I didn't want to interrupt and get scolded again. It's self-funding, so it doesn't affect either the tax rate or the amount of debt carried, the percent of debt carried under the levy limit.
That's what you hoping. But
That's
the
how it
town-
works. That's how sewer systems are funded across the state, across the nation, George. That's how it's done.
I know how it's done. You don't need to try to educate me about how it's done. I know how it's done. But the town has to pay first. The town has to meet the note when it comes. Whether the people pay or not, the town has to meet the note. I understand finance. I understand it very well. I'm simply saying that on this project, you want to move so fast and get it and push it and push it and push it so fast that, you know what I'm saying, oh, this ain't gonna happen, this gonna happen. You're putting in pieces and meals and all this. Listen, the people in Littleton are intelligent and they are smart. You're not gonna push stuff down our throat without a fight. And I'm gonna tell the citizen, because I look at it as now, it's just trying to push it down, just get the authorization to do it. You don't care. Because if you did, you will be wanting the people to be a part and behind you. And I don't see the people there. I think that the people need more information. And when they talk about appropriating money, whether you like it or not, people that don't pay, the town will still end up having to pay. I understand this system very well. A lot better than you may think I understand it. And I've been a part of the system and working with the people with EPA and so forth. I understand what the need is. But don't try to push stuff down people's throat. And let people talk and say what they want to say without you interrupting them. I don't appreciate that. I'll sit back in and hold my hand up to no end to be recognized. And when I'm called on, I speak. So treat me with respect. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Mr. Chair, go ahead.
Mrs. Kennedy?
Thank you. James Kennedy, 50 Gilson Road. I'd like to maybe we could all think about the risks that are involved with delaying this. By delaying this, you're sending a signal to the business community that this is possibly put off a little longer. People who are making very important decisions on investments, they have their cost of capital. Interest rates are still low, thankfully. If you think the town is investing money in a sewer, think of all the potential private capital investments that are going to happen and that are needed to improve the common and the infrastructure of the town. That's substantially more than what you're planning on investing. And the cost of that capital is going to change. So you want to think of the business decisions and the private investments that are going to happen. And you making this decision to delay further is going to make it harder for these investors to present a high return to people who are funding the upgrades. So please reconsider delaying this any longer. The economy is great. We're still chugging along. Certainly there are still risks, but the longer we delay, the higher the risk for everyone for this project to be a success. Thank you.
Ms. Houston?
Anna Houston, 55 Jennifer Street. So I was wondering, since the water department is presumably going to be taking this on and implementing, do we know why they're not present here to have this discussion? Because I think this is pretty valuable for them to be a part of the discussion, especially if on October 29th, they're ready to hit the road, and all of a sudden they get this news, or do they already know that, this is potentially what could be happening today? I think that they are an integral partner in making this happen or not happen, but it would be great if they could be here.
Joe, if I can respond.
When would the,
Can I respond to that question first, please? The working group that we have, that includes the water department and Nick Lawler, the water department, explicitly told us in no uncertain terms, we need direction from the Board of Selectmen. Which way do you want to go? They're prepared to do it either way. When I reached out to understand how the finance timing, the MassWorks money goes, when we looked at alternatives, they're involved in all of those pieces. In no uncertain terms, it was sent back to us as, you, Board of Selectmen, tell us the direction you want, and we'll implement it. So, to your point, that's why they're looking for us to get.
I'm not sure they were invited today either. Were they?
My understanding was that this was a Board of Selectmen
Okay,
discussion.
all right. Well,
Ms. Field, did you have something?
they should have been
well,
involved.
I just wanted to know if Article 9 does pass, at what point does do the water commissioners take over?
We've
That
already,
would- Yeah, it would need to go through, it would need to be finalized by both the House and the Senate, and then signed into law by the governor, before theoretically they have legal control. But the Board of Selectmen and the MOU that's been put into place is basically allowing them to continue to shepherd the process along the way until the full legal authority is put into place.
And how long does that take?
They're working together now. The water department is working together with the Board of Selectmen now.
I don't know, how
That's
long
the
does it take
legislation,
for the
before the end of the year, probably.
and we already have.
Working together now.
Yeah, right.
Part of what we've been working on all summer is getting the agreement between the Board of Selectmen and the Water Department in place to delegate that responsibility. So up until the point where the legislature assigns them formal legal responsibility, the technical authority has been delegated to them anyway. So functionally, nothing changes once the legislature blesses this. We're on the same path. The water department is in a position to
So the water
drive the
department would
technical.
be
Little
the
lemon.
prime
Yeah, I can take it.
responsibility for this at the time of this passage of this article, is that what you're saying?
That's right. I mean, we have an MOU with them currently. And to Mr. Sanders' point, I disagree with the term about passing the buck. I think it's more delegating to the more technically competent and fully fleshed out entity. We've been working with them for 6 months.
Yeah,
essentially the direction of town meeting.
The working understanding is, even when the baton is passed, as we've had them involved up till now, they will continue to keep us involved after the fact. They're just gonna be the lead on it, it's appropriate, they're better equipped to handle both the design and construction phase and better suited to run the department, but we've had them in the dialogue for the past couple of years already, and we expect that they will keep us in the dialogue going forward.
So who will be keeping the public informed outside of the regular meetings that you hold?
Yeah,
Who will
well,
be deciding, let's inform the public what this program is, let's see a whole picture of it, let's see where it's gonna go, when it comes out of the pipes, the whole picture. Who's going to be doing that? I have never had a very good impression of the water department, or Light and Water. I like them, they're excellent, but when it comes to the public, coming to them with concerns, they aren't always receptive.
yeah, well,
So, who takes responsibility? Where's it going to be?
Well, I think the public outreach component to that is really a matter for multiple entities to be involved with. And those are both boards and commissions, so that's the water commissioners, that's the Board of Selectmen. We still have responsibility for communicating that
yeah,
as
I
well.
guess so. I
But
don't know what-
there,
we wanna say.
there's
Next
also
time,
responsibility
I have no
there,
problem.
we've partnered with
Unveiling
the
the property
LBA
is-
to
budget is not a problem.
do that outreach as well. So that will continue forward with multiple parties reaching out with and running that.
Because the Department of Public Works at one time had information on their site about the sewer. So who's in charge here? to get the
Well, we
public-
needed a portal at that time to get the
Yeah.
information out, and that's, at that time, they were as good as any place to go for it. So, now that, this is being formalized, that the water department will be the place that probably, there's issues that will be jointly dealt with that you'll probably hear from us on, but,
So, if I may, it's been said that we're the leaders of the town and, the buck stops here essentially. So I think I can speak for all of us to say that in the event that we decide to hold off on Article 10 at town meeting and not move forward with it, I think every one of us has learned a lesson. And part of it is because we were trying to do other things, but during that process, during that time frame, there's other things that any one of us could have stepped up and tried to get additional information out to the public. So I'll commit to being involved with my colleagues that are the champions, Chase and Paul, the champions of moving the sewer forward. And I think all of us would commit to making sure that we give the sewering the common the highest and best opportunity to succeed. And I think it's on all of our goals. We've all identified it as a goal. So it's going to remain as goals of ours. So regardless of who is going to be, the sewer czar, we have a very important stake and role in making sure that it succeeds.
Unless,
I,
Go ahead.
I just want to say that I'm amongst the people who feels that I get very little information about what's going on in town unless I come to a meeting here. TV doesn't work so well for me, and I'm not going to come every Monday night. If I were going to do that, I'm not going to. But we don't have a newspaper that really tells anything, as far as I can see, especially now that there are many other towns involved. We don't, unless one is on Facebook or something like that, and you still aren't sure what you're hearing. I'm not sure how this should be solved, but I am sure that many, many people in town feel that all kinds of things that are important to them happen or are going to happen that they don't hear about until the last minute, and it's too late to do anything. If you want to make changes in town, you really have to be there, certainly in the middle, if not at the beginning, not at the end, not at the town meeting. And another thing that has been upsetting to a number of people is that we have these special town meetings, which cost the town a lot of money, and maybe we need to have them. But there was a time that we had a one-a-year town meeting, and it was long, and it was difficult for people, but now we're apt to have 2 or 3 that are also long and difficult certainly for people who have kids or work the next day or whatever. So I'd be very interested in having you all think about that and maybe get a group of people or do something about it. Because if you don't communicate to the people in town, they are always going to feel left out. And they're always going to feel on the other side of the barrier, and that's not good. We want the town people to be on your side.
You mind just identifying yourself?
Oh, sorry. Vera Spore, Newtown Road.
Mr. Chair, if I may. Yeah, I know we need to move on. So back to Article 10. Do we have a presentation? What are we going to, I know we received a memo and we have some information that was shared with us today, but what is the presentation for the town?
Well, if we decide as a board that we're not going to move forward.
I know, I'm just asking, right. Just paying, we haven't taken that vote yet.
Well, all right, but if there were an exercise, then I would suggest that we start with the budget that Chris has laid out and then recap again what the project entails, the things that were already voted in the spring. So I'm not sure, what level of detail on the numbers we want to present other than the budget and then a breakdown of how it affects betterments and the annual fee page, and then be available to answer questions on it. I think it's, getting again, this is kind of an academic exercise to where things are going, but I think we were not well served in the past by having blurs of numbers on the screen with our previous presentations, and I don't think it's probably wiser to be simple with the numbers and answer questions than it is to bury people in a bunch of numbers.
Right, so I guess my point is, so we're asking for $25.5 million.
Borrowing capacity.
Borrowing
yes.
capacity, but we don't have a visual presentation. And my feeling is that we should have put together a visual presentation and been sharing whatever that may be or look like a lot sooner than.
Even if we don't move forward with Article 10, we should have that.
Yeah, no, not moving forward.
One of the problem, I've had conversations with Nick, and I've met with their PR consultant, Jason Coppy, so he's looking for direction, if we were looking to do that, to put together presentations for town meeting.
Right, and so that's going forward. I guess my point is to where we are right now. Which supports my position that I don't think we're ready to move forward with Article 10 this time. So that's where I was going with that.
I think we needed our town meeting presentation, a week and a half away from town meeting, but if we needed it next week, we could have it next week.
Right, but I just don't think that I think it is something that should have been shared with the public sooner than right prior to town meeting, so. That's my thought.
All right. I think we debated this long enough.
Yeah.
What say the board? Any motion?
I mean, do we need a motion to not advance a motion?
Well, at some point, we do need to vote the actual supplementary documentation, and in order for me to draft the supplementary documentation in a way that's prepared and ready to be adopted at the meeting of the 24th, if the board is leaning in one direction or the other, it would be very helpful for that action to be taken tonight.
Then I guess what I would be interested in seeing is something on that supplementary information that says something like, if I've got my vote counts right, that the Board of Selectmen has voted not to advance a motion on Article 10 at this time, and simply leave it at that. Does it need to say anything else?
No.
We would propose the actual motion as well, at a minimum. Because the motion that's listed in the town meeting report is, it indicates that a motion would be presented at town meeting. Now, theoretically, you don't have to put that motion in print on the supplementary information, but the more that's in print, the easier, and I don't know if we have any
I
requirements.
think the moderator's preference is if you're not gonna go forward with the motion, you just vote not to go forward with the motion, and then he can go by it by just saying that.
You know the culture and history and preferences behind
I
that.
think I think it would be a vote to put no motion forward, and then in the supplementary report, you would say the board voted on October 8th, or
Oh, okay.
whatever it is, to put no motion forward.
Okay.
We can go on that long.
Then I move that the Board of Selectmen does not advance a motion for Article 10 at the fall 2019 town meeting.
Second.
Motion been made and second. All those in favor?
Aye.
All those opposed? No. All right. Article 11?
I think it's I think a lot of us have been waiting to debut the good news on that front for a while. Chase, unless you don't think we should do it, there's a great level of interest, and this has actually been kind of piloted by Water Commissioner Ivan Pegasic to explore, and at this point, we have information provided by the property owner, Al Fletcher, of property that's on Great Road in Littleton. It's next to the tubing park, 2.83 acres. It's land we actually looked at earlier on in the process, but at that time, we were looking at it because we were concerned about needing a different leach field. Weren't really thinking of it in terms of siting the plant, and it didn't pass muster as being a candidate for leach field. Unfortunately, that issue kind of resolved itself. The soils at the existing site. But it popped back up into our radar screen that, hey, wait a minute, he was interested in selling, so he's very interested, and in fact, he's out getting his own appraisals. The water commissioners have engaged Avery Associates to do an appraisal on our end. I don't think there's a big mystery of what price range the property's gonna end up selling at. I mean, but I'd just as soon not name a number since that part hasn't happened yet. But the property's great from a lot of perspectives. Doesn't really impact anybody, which was one of our major goals. It's not even visible. If you can picture it where the dirt road, which would be part of you've got it all in your packet. Yeah, that's the dirt road that comes off of 119. It's over the crest of the hill and beyond the tree line. And so for whatever visual impact there may be on with the building, which I think would be negligible anyway, but you're not going to see it, and it's not going to impact anybody. And there's a lot of, and it opens the door for a lot of possibilities with that property owner who's very interested in potentially, a bigger involvement. So I'll leave it at that. But that's the property in question. Oh, and I think Tom may want to speak to how we would have to handle this procedurally.
Sure. So this is land that we haven't currently considered, so it's coming at us new. And there's two ways that a town goes about acquiring land like this under state procurement laws. And one is to do a standard RFP, and the other is you are allowed to avoid the RFP if there is certain unique qualities to the property. In this case, we can certainly explore the unique characteristics and see if we could waive the RFP. So maybe holding that one aside, I don't think we're harmed by going through the RFP process. That we can identify the property at town meeting and put it forward to the town. And if we have the authority to buy it, we can then do an RFP. And if another property is presented as part of that RFP process, you may want to come back and say, wow, we found an even better one. So we'll hold off on this one and present the new one. If not, then we've gone through the proper procurement and can move to acquire the property.
Thank you, Tom.
And just might as well throw any other potential good news on the table. From a cash flow perspective, the seller was at least exploring interest in doing a lease to sale. So on our end of the finance committee at least might be interested that on our end of the bargain, that's probably not the worst idea in the world since cash flow at the beginning of the project is an issue.
All right, we're all set with, any other articles you want to bring up? Okay. Number 2 from Nick Lowell, is this something just to
It's
be?
just informational.
Just information in the
Yeah.
packet?
Yeah, I mean, if you could go, if you don't mind, I could, or you could go through it. He's just trying to raise awareness on the matter.
I'll let you go through it.
Be glad to. I'm gonna try to do this in a generalized way, the best I can. This is a notice that's entitled "Important Information for All Consumers Receiving Drinking Water from the the Littleton Water Department System." The notice provides important information regarding drinking water and contaminants known as per and polyfluoride. I hadn't practiced this. Substance, PFAS. Let's just go with PFAS. Although the most recent sampling results for the water department showed PFAS in the drinking water, the results were below the current health guideline established by the United States Environmental Protection Agency and Massachusetts Department of Environmental Protection. This notice provides information about Mass DEP's ongoing efforts to address PFAS in drinking water and provide health protective guidelines. This information is available on the town's website under the Board of Selectmen's page under Agendas, where you can find this packet, which contains the discussion items for today, and the public is encouraged to read it if you haven't already received it or seen it in another method.
Thank you. Anything else to the board? Motion to adjourn? So moved.
Second.
Motion been made and second to adjourn. All those in favor?
Aye.
Thank you all.